Hi, this is Matt Munisteri. I've been asked to speak a little bit about my guitar. This is a guitar that I got, I believe, in 2000. I got it from a great vintage instrument dealer and knowledgeable fellow and a very good guitar player, Larry Wexer, in New York City. It was sold to me as a 1927 Master Model L-5, Gibson Master Model L-5. Larry was wrong, but it's not his fault. A fellow named Joe Spahn found the shipping records from Gibson several years back, and since then the scholarship has changed. And I think I talked about this a little bit with my other L-5. Incredibly, I have two of these instruments. They are now both dated 1930. They are 8 digits apart in the serial numbers, so and they have the same factory order number, which is stamped on the inside. So they were both part of this batch of probably 10 guitars that were built side by side at Gibson. The order came in, I think, at the end of January in 1930, and the shipping records show that they were sent out to New York in I think March of 1930 or early April. And this is the guitar that I refer to as my L-5, and my other L-5 I call the DA L-5 because that was changed and new fretboard and refinished and blah, 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 in all likelihood by John D'Angelico. So this is the guitar that, on an unhappy day, I'm like, doesn't quite have enough bass. And on a happy day, I'm just like, it's the greatest guitar in the world. I know that there are some out there that have more mids, more bass. But this one is really, really even. It will always open up and give you more when you need it. And I've used it on so many recording sessions for really all kinds of music. I've used this on more pop things, and I've used it on a lot of singer-songwriter sort of stuff, even some sort of country stuff, and not for what you would think it would be, not just chunking out chords. It's a beautiful finger style instrument. Like, actually, in terms of the way it responds to a mic, I think it's a better finger style instrument than like an old OM, and I have a 1930 OM, so I kind of know what I'm talking about. It has all this clarity and note separation when you're playing it with fingers, but it's got this warmth and a quality that allows it to sit in a mix with a bunch of other instruments and not draw too much attention to itself, but just enough. And I've used this on so many things where there's all these other instruments and I'm playing like a very delicate thing like this. And it just manages to have this presence and a sort of like upfront focus coupled with warmth that I love. And I had a film score date a bunch of years ago where the guy wanted a specific Civil War era thing, and I brought like a 1923 small body Martin that I have, and with gut strings, and I brought the OM, I brought this, I brought a bunch of different things. And the same thing happened at that session that happens at pretty much anything when I bring a bunch of guitars. I start playing everything, and I get to this one, and the producer, the engineer is just like, that's the guitar. So Master Model L-5s are just different from 17-inch L-5s. 17-inch L-5s can be fantastic instruments, but there's a quality in these that doesn't say necessarily flat top or arch top. It's a sort of in-between zone. They are a little bit smaller across the bout. They're 16 inches instead of 17. They're a little bit shorter in scale. They're just under 25 inches. So they're not 25 and a half. And I find these to be just super comfy, and this particular one to be mine. So I mentioned that this was sold to me as a 27. The guy that then found the shipping records at Gibson is named Joe Spann, and he wrote a book about the history of the Gibson company. And that book wound up revising the history of these guitars. And it's dated to 1930 now. And I happened to meet Joe when I was down at Gruen Guitars. I had a session in Nashville and stopped in before my flight back. And I'm really glad that I did, because Joe was able to check out the guitar and get the serial number and told me some interesting things. It turns out that because now all these records exist of what was sent back to Gibson for repairs and then sent back, we know who owned it, at least for a period. It was sent back for a repair in 36. And the suspicion is that's when it got its new neck. It would have been originally a dot neck, not had the block markers on the fretboard, and it got a new neck in 36, which seems right, dates it about right with the peg head. And then by 38, the next time it was sent back by a guy named George Rose from an address in Detroit. Now it turns out George Rose was a banjo player in the 1920s and 30s who was a real professional banjo player. He was one of the Cats. He recorded with the Paul Whiteman Orchestra. I believe he recorded with the Gold Cat Orchestra in Detroit, which is one of the greatest bands in the world. So he was working with Steve Brown, legendary bass player. He recorded with Frankie Trumbauer, and he recorded with Bix Beiderbecke. He recorded with Trumbauer and small group stuff. So he was really a happening guy on the banjo, and I guess he started making the transition at some point in the 30s to guitar, along with the rest of the world after Eddie Lang. And by 38, this guitar was in his possession. He sent it back to Gibson several more times between 38 and 47. Basically, especially if you were living in a town that didn't have a lot of luthiers, and he was based in Detroit this whole time, it's possible there just wasn't anyone that he trusted, and he liked the luthiers at Gibson. So, think about how often you take an instrument in to someone, to have it fixed. It might be like once a year, it might be once every couple of years. So it doesn't seem like it's unusual for him to have sent it back like 3 or 4 times in a period of 10 years. The last time it was sent back to George Rose was in 47. And during those years, between 38 and 47, we know that George Rose played guitar briefly, subbing for Charlie Christian in Benny Goodman's group. In the small group. He didn't record with Goodman. It was a brief thing, but he was playing some form of amplified acoustic guitar, some pickup on it, during some radio sound checks that I think still exist. So it's possible this guitar subs for Charlie Christian with Benny Goodman's group. Another thing that I discovered after learning that George Rose owned this guitar that really sort of freaked me out is that in 1953, George Rose is credited as playing on a recording of Your Cheating Heart, the Hank Williams hit from the previous year, 52, with Louis Armstrong in New York. So it's a big band. I think maybe Cy Oliver is the music director. It's a big ensemble, and he's playing acoustic guitar. You can't hear the guitar. I've listened with headphones, and there's strings. There's all kinds of stuff going on. But there he is. He's credited. And in my heart, I choose to believe that this guitar recorded a Hank Williams tune with Louis Armstrong. Because if you're someone who seeks for stories and meaning in life, and you're me, that kind of thing would mean a lot to you. I should mention, because otherwise I'll get cards and letters, that there are promotional pictures of George Rose from the 1940s and 50s with an Epiphone. But a lot of guitarists owned Epiphones and Gibsons. Epiphones are very sweet sounding. They're gentle. I'm not calling them feminine per se, but they don't necessarily have the muscle of an L-5, but they sound great in rhythm stuff and they mic really well. So who knows? We don't know what guitar he was using really, but I know it was this one. People ask often what the story is with the pickguard. After having one pickguard disintegrate on me, it was always kind of bothering me that the pickguard on these guitars, first of all, you've got this ridiculous bar that Gibson came up with, this thing that goes across and holds the pickguard on. And second of all, I would find that the sound of the guitar would always seem better when I had the pickguard off. And it makes sense because a Gibson pickguard typically is covering enough of the sound hole to about here. You know, it just kind of comes right over it. And that just seemed kind of silly. So I asked Tom Crandall of T.R. Crandall in New York to work with me on designing something that wouldn't need a bar to be attached, that would float and actually not be pressing on the bridge and could be attached so well to the neck that it wouldn't need another form of support. And as far as design, I feel like this guitar comes from an age of romance and kind of the belle époque of American music in the hands of someone like Eddie Lang. And I felt it needed gratuitous curves and points just because it's fabulous to have curves and points, not because they make sense. I'm really sick and tired of this world equating utilitarianism with better. I think just because something's utility is ridiculous. Those tiny little pick guards that all the like contemporary jazz guitarists have for the people with the tiny little picks and the tiny little movement of their hands to coax the tiny little sounds out of their guitars. I didn't want one of those. I wanted something with, romance. So Tom and I and a great worker at his shop came up with these points and these curves, and I think they did an incredible job. And we put a piece of walnut burl on the top, and it's got a graphite bar that's like what you would use, to construct modern aircraft, holding the thing in place, so it's really stable. And I'm very happy with it.